Hello everyone. Thank you for joining this virtual connect session. We will be starting shortly. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes. We are expecting a few more attendees to join, then we will start. Thank you for joining this session. We'll be starting shortly. We're just waiting for a few more folks to join. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining this virtual connect session. How to lead DevOps teams during times of remote working. I sincerely appreciate you joining this session today. My name is Deepesh. I head DevOps COE at ITC Infotech. At ITC Infotech, we have been building enterprise DevOps platforms for our customers for last 8 years. During this period, we have set up decentralized delivery models for our customers. Today, some of our DevOps platforms are continuously delivering over 1,000 applications. In today's session, we will discuss about managing DevOps teams operating remotely. That will include governance, team structures, and nuances of running DevOps teams. With folks now running from home or from different locations, we will talk about challenges that leaders face when we are leading technology delivery teams running remotely. To understand the challenges and how DevOps team can manage during times of remote working, we have renowned speaker, thought leader, and an expert on DevOps, Mr. Freddy, head of DevOps practice at EPSA Group, South Africa. Welcome, Freddy. Thank you for agreeing to come on board for our virtual connect session.
Thank you, Deepesh. It's really a pleasure to join you and share my thoughts and knowledge around DevOps and leading in these environmental tough times.
Yeah. Thank you, Freddy. During this virtual connect session, we will conduct a couple of polls that will be during the session. And at the end of it, we will have a survey. You will be presented with the survey session. Your inputs are extremely valuable to us, hence we would love to see your inputs. So to start with, Freddy, on your LinkedIn page, you are talking about being an intrapreneur. Can you please explain or help us understand what does this mean in the context of DevOps and how does it help organizations?
So entrepreneurship can easily be confused with entrepreneurship. And there's two differences between the two terms. So entrepreneurship, it's whereby you follow the certain guidelines of entrepreneurship, but you are within an organization. So you don't necessarily take the risk of, for example, budgets, your marketing, and all of that, but you're using certain principles that you would use when you're an entrepreneur, principles such as the principles of building a team, saving costs, making sure that your process of production is actually runs very smoothly. And that's why it's referred to intra instead of intra, which is external and internal respectively. So that's what entrepreneurship is, and I think it's a very good character to have when leading a DevOps team as well.
Right. So as far as DevOps is concerned, how did you get attracted to DevOps? How did it start for you? And what attracts you to DevOps?
When I started in the IT world, I was actually a developer close to 20 years ago. So the whole process of software development was of really great interest to me. And when the innovation around DevOps came through, I became very much interested in understanding how can we actually make the process of production very fast while we do not avoid the fact that we're working with people. because that's what DevOps also focuses on. It doesn't necessarily only focus on the software development lifecycle itself or the processes of, but it also focuses on the fact that the people that are developing that kind of software, they're actually humans, and it admires that fact, and that's why got me very much interested in engaging more and trying to understand what this is all about.
Right. So if I summarize it, you said it is all about the culture, people, technology all coming together, and that is something that excited you about DevOps, right, Freddie?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, Freddie, if you talk about DevOps, let's say there are many definitions of DevOps. If you talk to 10 different people, we will possibly hear 12 answers, right? So, what is your definition of DevOps? How do you define it, and how, in your practice, what is DevOps to you?
I think correct by saying every organization will probably have their own definition, and I'll come to the reason why that is happening. Um, but what's very what I can say is the general definition of DevOps is whereby the practices that are being used to develop software or the processes of the software development lifecycle that will improve that process of development, and it's more like a complement of the agile method. But what comes into play with that? It most definitions will probably include the word or term culture.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the key in each and every definition or the common denominator actually when it comes to defining DevOps. That's one of the main reasons why each and everyone who's practicing DevOps or organizations that are practicing DevOps will come up with a different definition for DevOps. It's because you will never find the same culture anywhere. Organizations, what makes them to be different and to be profitable is actually the culture within that keeps them competitive, and so therefore that makes them unique. So the culture in itself, before even you come to the strategy, will make the organization unique, and therefore you find that the DevOps definition is also unique. But the key for me is understanding that it is all about the culture, it's all about collaboration, and making sure that you have the right processes in terms of governance and security as well.
Right. So essentially, as long as we have the culture that the people who are actually on the ground, the technology teams who have trust between them, and the leaders actually work very closely with teams. So that is actually the building block of the culture, right? So the building block is primarily the transparency and the trust. Would you agree with that,
Yes,
or how do
true.
you see?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's how it is. I mean, that's why I say I call myself an entrepreneur in that space as well, because I get to work with my people very closely and the clients as well. And that's a cultural thing as well. So that's why the two they actually merge together very well.
Right, right. So we'll talk a bit about the cloud part when it comes to DevOps. There are many misconceptions around how cloud actually influences DevOps. So as more and more organizations actually adopt cloud platforms, it has been easier than ever to simply move your workstation in what we call as a plug and play mode from anywhere, right? And what are your actually thoughts about cloud migration and adoption influencing DevOps teams and in a decentralized delivery model? Is it required? It can still be done without migrating to cloud, or cloud actually helps in it? So how do you see it, Freddie?
Um, the cloud definitely helps in making sure that you have a good running process in terms of or processes in terms of DevOps. But one key thing that we need to also identify or be aware of is that the cloud adoption is not only about infrastructure adoption. or there are certain elements that plays into it, and therefore that requires the right strategy. So the assumption that I can just go and adopt, firstly, any favor of the cloud providing companies out there, and I think it will just work for me. That's that's one of the misconceptions, because that's not really the case. So the processes, number one, should align with your strategy as a business before you even think about moving to the cloud. Number two, how are you going to manage moving to the cloud? Should be another question that you're going to ask yourself. Number three, how are you going to access these environments when you move into the cloud? Number three is the security. Is it secure enough for you, for the kind of business that you're running, in order for you to move to the cloud? So there are certain questions that needs to be answered. It's not a copy and paste and say I'm going to run on either AWS or Google Cloud. It's not like that. You need to fully design a strategy. And in most instances, what I have seen in my experience is that before you even commit to fully moving into the cloud, maybe come up with a hybrid strategy whereby you still keep some of your processes running in-house. You can either sync the data in between or have failover, and still make sure that you still secure while you also learning. Because remember, being in the cloud, it's something new to every software development lifecycle. It's new to DevOps itself. It's a new standard. It's a new practice. It's a world that we haven't touched before. So there's going to be a lot of learnings and a lot of mistakes to be made, and therefore it would be good to, first things first, I would advise to come up with a hybrid strategy when moving to the cloud.
Right. That is exactly what we experience when we are talking to many of our customers and also implementing the new age solutions that most of the customers actually want to experience cloud by having a hybrid model instead of directly getting into cloud. So the question that comes to my mind, Freddie, is if an organization decides that okay, they would either have a hybrid model or they migrate to cloud, does it help the technology delivery remotely? Because if we really look at the discussions that we have in most sessions these days, it is all about how do we make remote work happen, right? So does this really help us?
I mean, that would help. I mean, it does. I would say it does help to move to the cloud. And also remote work right now. It's also, I mean, the pandemic really hit us when we were least expecting it. We're not fully prepared. I mean, we saw companies buying laptops like crazy because most of their employees were using desktops. So the whole remote work situation was it really hit us at a time whereby we least expected, and so it was difficult to adjust and make sure that we deliver still in the software that we have. But having DevOps within your organization now, that's when everything came to play. Because I mean, in the DevOps culture, we're already talking about not only working remotely but working anywhere. That's where we are with the discussion. We want to find out, is it possible to actually work anywhere, not just remotely to your business? And the difference between that is that there's some assumption that when people are saying remotely, we're meaning there will be some kind of corridor or infrastructure or your home, whereby you're connecting to your working environment. But we started looking at, is it possible for me to walk into any internet cafe and where I get any wireless connectivity, and I'm able to connect and work? We've seen that some of the technology companies have started designing portable wireless devices that you can take anywhere. You can now connect with any smartphone and turn it into a Wi-Fi dongle and be able to connect and work wherever you are. So I think it helped on the fact that they the companies, or as a business at Absa, we already had the DevOps culture, and we've been practicing it for quite some time right now.
Right, right. So that is exactly what we have also experienced, Freddie. The technology delivery teams who have adopted the cloud, uh, it was easier for them to start working remotely when we started all this work from home due to COVID-19 situation. So that actually helped us operate remotely faster. While the other teams also who are mostly delivering software on-prem, eventually all of the technology delivery happened remotely, but the teams who were mostly operating on cloud, it was much easier for them to quickly move their workstations or laptop to different locations. So since you come from the banking and fintech background, so this banking has always been highly regulated for obvious reasons. So accordingly, data security has always been paramount, considering sensitive nature of the business. So how do you think that banking industry is managing governance aspects when DevOps team operate remotely? I believe a part of this answer lies with DevSecOps practices, but myself and the audience would love to hear your thoughts from the industry, Freddie.
Yes, I mean, security is something that's very critical. We normally say data is the new currency, but I think the security of that data is much more important. So we need to protect our currency with whatever we have. So as a bank, I mean, you know that we pretty much rely on data. Every business that we do is reliant on data. So it's very critical for us to make sure that we secure it. And the aspect of DevSecOps comes into play as well. I mean, we need to have a security strategy. We need to make sure that the hardware that we have is secured. Even though with the new challenges whereby we have to work remotely. But that's where some companies, they sometimes fall short, because we tend to think of security in terms of hardware and application security, but we never think about social security. And by social security, I mean, is now that your employee is working remotely, who are they sitting next to? Are there any chances of them um, having social engineering and being hacked, or some information being shared within friends or family members that they shouldn't? So it's very critical for us to fully understand the social side of security as well. I mean, there can be many issues whereby you have data leak, or you can have your innovation ideas being pushed, because we're still surrounded by people that are working for our competition. And some of them are actually family members. So it's very critical that we don't, as an organization, only look at security in terms of application and hardware of it, but we should make sure that we have the necessary VPN, for example, security that's there to make sure that when we do actually connect, it makes it very difficult for anyone else to come through and listen to our conversations, or the copying of data. We need to make sure that the data that's being transferred between data centers is also secured, because we are working with sensitive data, like you've said or alluded. So it is very critical in terms of DevOps itself to have the awareness and strategy of implementing secure processes and building secure applications while using the current infrastructure that they have. And that's where DevSecOps was born, to say, let's make sure that our processes are secured. Let's make sure that the machines we're using are also secured, but mostly let's also make sure that the places where we are when we produce this kind of software is also secured. So our employees should also be secured as well.
Right. So, Freddie, if I summarize it for our audience, so it is about the physical security of the data that is going out of the office premises. Uh, that is one aspect of it. Second aspect is how do you make sure that the teams are actually working in isolation so that the data does not get compromised, in addition to the DevSecOps part of it, wherein we have enough security controls as we deliver technology. Is that correct summarization, Freddie?
Yes, sure. That's very correct, Prakash.
Perfect. So, Freddie, related to banking again, how do you envision that banking getting benefited from DevOps, considering that fintech or especially banking is one of the largest investors on the technology?
Sure. I think you're correct by saying um, banking is reliable or reliant on technology, and they are big investors in that. And how they benefited from DevOps is that with a
Right,
bank, in order for it to stay very competitive, the digital transformation strategy should be on point. So you cannot afford to be digitally left behind. So in order to make sure that you are digitally ahead or you're digitally competitive, you will need to produce software at a very fast pace. That's number one. Number two is your innovation. You will have to conduct unit tests and for the particular innovation that you are producing, which DevOps allows you to do that at a very quick rate. So in terms of the banking sector, I think a lot of banks benefited from having a DevOps environment within there because of that key point that we need to be our digital transformation needs to be always ahead, and so that we all stay competitive in that market.
right. So, Freddie, it is time for our first poll. I'll just switch over uh, to the poll. So, the first poll. So the poll is, do you think that DevOps will play even larger role in establishing decentralized delivery model post COVID-19? I believe as more and more teams start working remotely, I believe DevOps is going to play a lot larger role when teams are working remotely and more teams are going to adopt decentralized delivery model. So I'm expecting that most of the attendees would say yes to this. So what is your thought? What do you think, Freddie?
Um, I think I would also select a yes there, because it will definitely. I mean, we are entering a world of artificial intelligence, for example. Um, it's a world that as a DevOps engineer, it's something that you need to play into, and making sure that your teams, even though are decentralized, that they have the right security and they have the right model to also produce post COVID-19. So we cannot also plan for COVID-19 because post COVID-19 will need to actually continue delivering software. And I believe that the adoption of it. So you will see a very you see a lot of people starting to adopt DevOps strategies going forward because they will realize that the principles and culture of DevOps actually it helps companies to stay decentralized, especially their teams, and that the delivery model is actually quite very extensive and very good in implementing and producing these applications.
Right. So, Freddie, the results are out, and we see that 100% of the answers are saying yes. So, this is a great news for all the DevOps enthusiasts that we have. So, this is going to be a great news for all the DevOps professionals, Freddie.
Yes, actually.
Uh, so pretty, as far as the adoption of DevOps is concerned, so what we have noticed is in most of the successful DevOps implementations, it has been an evolution than a big bang transition project. So, how did it start at EPSA from your experience? Would you like to share your experience? How did it go there?
Yes, I can share a few of my experiences and challenges when trying to introduce the DevOps culture in my department. What was very critical and what I needed to understand was that um, these people have been using the previous processes um, for years, and to them it was the best way of doing things. And so I had to be very sensitive in making sure
Mhm.
that we're bringing the change. So it wasn't we didn't wake up one morning and said, listen everyone, from going forward there's source control management. You just copy all the code into into GitLab or GitHub, and that's where we're keeping it. But instead, what we did was we started asking questions. Do you think your code is very secure? How are you handling versioning in your code? How are you doing testing? How are you monitoring? Do you have a strategy for learning? Things like that. And those are all the principles and processes or methodology of DevOps. And then we had to address that, and that's what we did. Obviously, because of cultural differences within the organization itself, it doesn't make it very easy. It doesn't mean that because you have a strategy and you understand the process, and then the implementation of that particular process will then be made easy for you. There obviously you will get a lot of pushback from some guys, and then you will
Mhm.
get some that will easily adopt. You need to make sure that the organizational strategy is well communicated to the team. That's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure that your departmental strategy is aligned to the organizational strategy, or your business strategy is aligned to the organizational strategy. To make sure that because the people that are there in that department, they buy into the vision and strategy of the business. That's why they decided to join that particular business. So if you come up with a strategy that actually supports the organizational strategy, it makes it a bit easier than if you come up with a strategy that's totally and completely different, because then the people will not buy into it, and then therefore the buying in and the implementation of DevOps becomes very difficult. And that's why some companies have failed even today to implement the DevOps culture within their organization.
Right. So, a related question there, Freddie. So, most of the organizations like EPSA would have a large vendor ecosystems, and technology delivery teams are spread across multiple geographies, right? So, how does it work at EPSA? How does DevOps help you in delivering technology in a distributed structure?
Um, so you're quite correct. I mean, as a bank, we have a lot of different IT teams, and
Mhm.
all of them are all of them are focused into delivering the bank strategy, right? So we needed to make
Mhm.
sure that um, the way we do things, we actually supporting each other as teams. We needed to understand that in order for us, for example, to be able to build software and make sure that that software is secure, we will have to have a security team within APSA. And that falls part of the DevSecOps. So we including them into the mix like that. we know that the software that we are building will need to be hosted somewhere in the data centers, and therefore the data center team or infrastructure team plays a big role. And so with the application operating system, as well. So the understanding as a DevOps leader that in order for me to be successful in implementing this culture or these processes, I will need all the other distributed teams to play a big role to make sure that I deliver was very critical. And that's where we tend to fail, because if we don't recognize all the other distributed teams, we start working in silos. And once we work in silos, the strategy easily fails. And therefore there'll be no learning, there'll be no continuous learning. You will have 15 different versions of DevOps tools that are running within the very same organization. You will find that the culture is completely different, whereby you communicate with one team and they're willing to help, wake up in the middle of the night and try and make sure that you are being assisted, and then you get another team that will say we'll look at it in the morning. And therefore that's the balance in the two is very critical, and therefore you should understand as a leader that it's not only up to the DevOps team to make sure that we deliver good quality software or we stay very competitive digitally, but it's up to the other teams that are there within the organization as well.
Right. So if I summarize it, it all boils down to the culture of the organization, right? So would you agree with that, Freddie?
Yes, I fully agree with that. It boils down to that.
Yeah, yeah. So, Freddie, it is very well documented and publicized knowledge that DevOps works best in cloud native application design patterns and running on virtualized or cloud environments. How do you see it operating at EPSA, and what are your thoughts around it? Does this new age technologies or architecture patterns also facilitate seamless operations in distributed teams?
Yes, it does. I mean, autonomy plays a very big role in this. Even though we move to the cloud, we need to stay autonomous. And that's where we are as APSA. So we came up with our own strategy. We know that we want to go to the cloud, and we identified which cloud provider we'll be going with. And we didn't just wake up and pick that cloud provider. We went and checked everything about them possible, and therefore we made a decision to go with that particular cloud service provider. And then we made sure that as well our strategy talks to what we want to be doing in the future in terms of adopting that particular cloud provider. You can have, for example, we still do have things like your Kubernetes orchestration tools within APSA, but we don't mind using other cloud provided tools that can orchestrate this infrastructure or containerization. So it's understanding the world as well that we're going into, and making sure that the strategy that we have is well aligned, and we will survive past COVID-19 as well.
Right. So do you see application modernization towards cloud native apps is something that organizations are actually investing upon?
Yes, definitely. That's what we're going to be seeing in the near future. A lot of companies will be going to the cloud. The only worry is, are they going to have the right strategy for it? And that's what I constantly keep on trying to repeat and make sure that these organizations, they fully understand that you actually will need a strategy to go to the cloud. Don't just go and pick the cloud provider, or just go to the cloud because you went to a conference and you heard a speaker speak about these cloud providers, and you therefore come back as a CIO and you say we're going to the cloud. You need to have your strategy and budgeting as well in place, because it can be, for some businesses it will be cheaper to for some, especially banks, it will be cheaper for them to go to the cloud, but for other businesses or sectors, it would actually be more expensive for them to go to the cloud. So it's a whole strategy. It's playing up with the budget and making sure that you have the right tools and mechanisms to go to the cloud as well. But one thing that we must not forget, and I very emphasize this as well, is the skill. Industries we still, especially in the banking sector, and this is what ABSA has done very well. We are certified up until to a CTO level. We had the CTO currently bragging about his AWS certification in an architectural level. So that tells you how the motivation around going to the cloud and making sure that we have the right skills to go to the cloud as well.
Right. So if I summarize it, it is more about having the right skills within the organization and having the right strategy for cloud migration and application modernization towards the cloud native apps. This is what I summarized from what you said. So that brings us to the next or the second poll that we have here. Right. So looking at the scenario, what the discussions that we have been having, what will be your organization's technology delivery priority post COVID-19? So if I look at the options, these are all looking like something that organizations would want to invest upon. If I pick my choice, I would say that, okay, if I have an enterprise DevOps platform, then I would require a cloud strategy, and also that would require me to kind of relook at my application portfolio towards probably modernizing them. So if I pick the second option, then probably I would be covering the other as well automatically. So this is my take. So what do you think? What would be your take, Freddie?
Actually, I fully agree with you. I mean, it's critical that we should have all of them at least. So in order to cover, I would say establishing your DevOps platform for enterprise is very, very critical. And it's one that I think it's gonna be part of our priority post COVID-19. So I would go for the second one as well.
Okay, so we'll just wait for the poll results. So here we have, so what I see here is establishing DevOps platform is 36%. So there is a tie between the DevOps platform and data security and integration. So this is an interesting place. And we see cloud adoption at 18% and virtualization at 9%.
Yes,
Okay,
it actually
this
kind
is
of
great.
makes sense. I mean, having a good enterprise DevOps environment, you will definitely worry about the security of your data because,
Right.
like I said in the beginning, data is the new currency, and therefore you should worry about your currency or the security of your currency. But a good enterprise DevOps environment or culture will definitely address that. So I kind of fully agree with the poll as well.
Yeah. So so we'll just move on. So when implementing large-scale DevOps platforms, we have come across challenges related to adoption, right? Or I would say delayed adoption. So how has your experience been, and what is that you did differently to attract adoption of DevOps at EPSA, Freddie?
So when I made sure that I introduced DevOps, I also understood that it's not introducing a set of tools. It's actually introducing a culture. I knew that I was working with people from day one, and that was very, very important for me. So I needed the buy-in of the people in order to be successful, and that's how I went about it, and that's how I kind of I did differently from other businesses. I did not come with a strategy and gave it to them and I said implement it. They were part of the DevOps committee that I established. I made sure that I constantly feedback to them and I listen to what they're saying, and we educate each other and make sure that we're creating this new adoption. And they understood that these are the new ways of work. One thing for sure, we wanted to stay competitive, and we wanted to make sure that our delivery, when it comes to delivering good software or applications, it's of a very good standard. And we have improved tremendously after that, and they can also see it. And therefore, that's what I did differently. I literally involved everyone in the process of drafting our strategy, and I communicated the end goal in the beginning. I made sure they understand my vision and they understood where I want to be. And then I therefore asked them to help me get where I want to be. If I may just expand a bit on that, Jeff Bezos once said, in order for you to stay very competitive, you have to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And I fully agree with him. And I knew that the people that are in my team, that I surround myself with, they're very smart people, and I didn't take them for granted. And therefore, they helped me create that strategy and implement it and make sure that we deliver on that.
Right. So, Freddie, we are just over a minute, so I'll take the last question before we take the questions from our attendees. So, what would be your advice for entrepreneurs in technology? What would you advise?
I would say make sure that in whatever you do, that you find your why, and you commit to your why, and that's number one. Number two is this is very, very critical for me, is to make sure to find your just project within that environment. And what do I mean by just project is making sure that whoever you're servicing, whoever you're talking to, it's an opportunity for you to be a servant, for servant leadership, to be able to serve other people, and because that's very critical in the DevOps environment. Because once you do that, you start building a culture of continuous learning. Because when you continuously share your experiences and your knowledge, you are continuously learning as well, and that's very difficult. That's very very, very critical in a DevOps environment. And that's why I advise, that would be my number one advice to them, to say, don't go in there and with a lot of arrogancy and not learning, but you should go in there and be able to make sure that you service the people that it could be your clients, it could be the pal sitting next to you, it could be in a particular project, you give it your all. And I also sometimes say, find what you love and let it kill you. That's what I normally say to my team. So once you find that your why and the commitment and your just project, just push through towards it and make sure you learn as much as possible and share as much as possible as well.
That's very well said, Freddie. So we'll just open the questions now from audience. Okay, so we have a question here. What should be the focus, whether it should be on outputs or processes? What would be your advice, Freddie?
I would say it's very critical to focus on the processes than the outputs that you're getting. Because if you're gonna focus on your output and you don't mind how you're producing, you might be producing a product that's not well informed, number one, because the people that are producing it for you are not doing it the right way, are not doing it quick enough, are not being challenged. There is no innovation in your outputs and all of that. So even though outputs are critical, I would say make sure that your focus also is on how you do things. How fast do you build? What kind of people do you have within your team? And does your team produce in a level whereby the quality that comes out in terms of output is outstanding. So I would say look at the processes.
Right. Yeah. So processes that deliver output in a timely manner. So the process optimization that will help deliver the output is what you are pointing towards, Freddie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Freddie, we have a bunch of other questions, but we are running out of time now. I would like to thank you very much for your time today and agreeing for this session. Your experience and insights have been very useful to me, and I'm pretty sure our audience would feel the same way. So, thank you very much, Freddie.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
To our audience, thank you for attending this virtual connect session. We hope you found it useful and enjoyed as much as Freddie and I did. We shall have lot many sessions like this in future. Please keep watching our social media channels to know about them. And towards the end of this, you will be presented with a survey. So I would request that you take up the survey and share your thoughts around it. Thank you very much. With this, we come to an end of today's session. Thank you and stay safe. Thank you.
Cheers.